Hey there, Streakers. Welcome to another episode of the Streaking Podcast. Today's guest is an accomplished author and a firm believer in the power of small acts of kindness to make a profound impact on the world. Through his national best-selling book, HumanKind, Changing the World One Small Act at a Time, which Forbes called the most uplifting and life-affirming book in years, he inspires readers to embrace the idea that even the smallest gestures of compassion and generosity can create a ripple effect of positive change. With a genuine passion for storytelling, he weaves together heartwarming anecdotes, personal experiences, and thought-provoking insights to demonstrate how acts of kindness have the power to transform lives, foster connections, and bring about a more compassionate society. His work not only uplifts and inspires, but also serves as a reminder that each person has the ability to make a meaningful difference in the lives of others and in the world at large. In addition to being an author, he is also an investor and teacher. He has served on the board of Big Brothers Big Sisters and is on the board of Hope Works. He and his wife Maya have been married for 24 years and are proud parents of Jack, who is the world champion of Dudley Ball. Let's welcome Brad Aronson to the Streaking Podcast, and let's start streaking.
Welcome, Brad. Thanks so much for coming on board today. We're so excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is great. So as I look at, you can see why we're excited to talk to you when you talk about one small act of kindness at a time, which of course is our main focus with streaking, is how the small things can make such a big difference. So tell us a little bit about what kind of brought you to the place of wanting to write a book, and why about kindness? Like what brought you to where you are here?
So, I've always loved writing. Since I've been a kid, I've been writing, books and comics and cartoons. And, specifically this book, one of my inspirations was the high school graduation of a mentee of mine. She went to a school called Girard College. And even though it's called Girard College, it is actually a high school in Philadelphia.
Oh.
And at her graduation, on one side of me sat a 70-something-year-old man. And he said that he had graduated from Girard and it changed his life. So he had been coming back every single year to support the next generation of graduates. And
wow.
There's this part of the graduation where you sing the school song, and he stood up and belted it out so proudly. It was just amazing.
Wow.
And on the other side of me sat this woman who was crying. And she told me, she said, I thought my daughter would be dead or in jail, and here she is graduating.
Oh.
And the commencement speaker was telling us, when he got up, he said how amazing it was, because the students at Girard were from areas of Philadelphia where statistically it was expected that many of them would drop out of high school and that very few would go on to college. Yet every single graduating senior of this class had been accepted to college. And he
Wow.
talked about, it was amazing. He's like, this is the hurdles they overcame. This is what they've done. And it's wonderful, but unfortunately, these students are inheriting a world full of negativity. And that's why you won't see anything about their graduation, about their accomplishments in the news tomorrow. So, of course, the next day I wake up, I get online, I look everywhere, and there is nothing. So I get our daily newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I look through every single page. And it was so disappointing because I felt like I was an extra in an inspirational movie just watching this happen.
Yes.
And you feel like so uplifted. I thought if everyone knew about this, they would feel great. And I decided that if I wanted to have more of these types of stories out there, like about people and places that transform lives, I should do something about it and start writing about it. So I started, writing these stories, and often, as you said, focused on how these seemingly small acts can change a life. Because so often you hear, like I live in Philadelphia, we are a high poverty city with a lot of challenges. And I hear people say, like, gosh, there are so many homeless people, there's so much crime, like there's no way I can make a difference. Like, how could you ever make a difference? And wanting to show people that we all have the power to make a difference. And we don't need to be millionaires or have an army of helpers. Like, we as individuals can do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was good.
I have two threads that I want to follow, and I'm not sure which one to follow first. But the first thing I wanted to notice is that, one, I love that you were sitting at a graduation and you got the story of both of the people sitting next to you, which means that you noticed them as people and took the time to talk to them. Like you got that story, which just that act alone, sometimes I think we go through so much of life and we're doing our thing, and there's all these people around us with all these stories, but we may not always take the effort to find those stories. And just the act of being able to talk to those two people totally changed the trajectory of your life, in the sense that you're like, you did something with that. So first of all, that was my amazing thought, was just taking that time to talk to people and be inspired by their stories. Do you do that naturally? Or was that something that, like, have you always talked to people?
Or was that kind of the moment that it changed?
Yeah.
So I am naturally interested in people.
Okay.
So I love hearing people's stories. I love talking to people. And something you said was a common theme I saw in the book. So because my book is about these small acts of kindness that transform people's lives, I talked to hundreds of people who needed a small act of kindness to transform their life. And all of them agreed. I asked them all, like, what would be helpful to you? And we talked about that. And there was one thing that everyone agreed on. And I mean, I used to be in advertising. We did a lot of market research. I don't remember anything that everyone agreed on. But of the hundreds of people I talked to, every single person agreed that what made a huge difference to them was being seen.
Yeah.
And these were people going through a rough time, and they would say, I don't want to, a lot of them, like, they didn't want to talk about the rough time they were going through, but they wanted to know people saw them. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a huge opportunity for us, because so often, like, I would guess that all of us know someone who's going through a rough time.
Yeah.
And often we don't reach out to them because we think, oh, it's awkward. Maybe they don't want to talk about it. I don't really know them that well. Yeah. And what I heard was, reaching out to them is just like sending them a note. Hey, I was thinking of you. Or texting them, hey, I was thinking of you and want to send you this joke. It's not like having an awkward conversation. It's just sending them, or I baked some cookies. Here's an extra group that I baked. But showing that we're thinking of them. And people said, like, when they were going through these difficult times, that tiny little acknowledgement gave them the strength to keep going. And like, along those lines, one of the biggest fears I heard from people who were like, well, I want to be helpful, is I don't know what to say. It's kind of awkward. Yeah. And as people, we naturally want to help others. Mm-hmm. So we might want to find the silver lining. And if someone tells us, like, all these problems they're going through, we might want to say, it's going to be okay. I know you can get through it. And what I heard was that all we have to say is thank you for sharing. Mm-hmm. And that's all. We don't have to, like, come up with anything else. And it's funny because since learning that, I teach, and a lot of my students have been through significant trauma, and they often share stories. And when they do, I just say, thank you for sharing. And it's like, the student smiles and, like, thanks for listening, mm-hmm. And sometimes I want to, like, get a hug. So I think to what you were saying, being seen is so important, and it's a power all of us have, is to see other people, to kind of give them strength and be helpful.
Yeah. I think about that whole idea of being seen, and it's fun because we played a game during the Christmas season a couple of years ago called the Smile Game. And one of the things that we had to do was get someone to smile back at us.
You were going to the mall. This was before COVID. So the mall just before Christmas, that week before Christmas, was a mass mayhem of people.
Just huge.
And
especially in Georgia. I mean, yes. It was just massive.
And you would take our family and all of our kids, that we have 7, but some of them are married now at that time. And so there was more. And that was the game, is that they had to go and get as many smiles as they could. And they counted them. Like, every smile was a tally mark.
Right.
Go ahead.
And as we did this, we noticed that there was a way to help people to get that smile, that the acknowledgement of the person had to be a certain way where I acknowledge you, not some creepy smile where I'm just smiling at everyone. But
And it's funny you say that because you learned that a creepy smile did not get you smiles back. A
no,
creepy smile got you looks like, what's wrong
runs,
with you?
run away. But this one was where when you acknowledge them and then gave them a slight smile, they would smile back. And it was, but it was this moment, like what you said, where I see you, you've seen me, we have a small connection. And it brought this little moment of joy in your life.
I love that idea.
And
So
it was,
how many people were you able to make smile in that mall visit?
So total between all of us, we had 150 smiles that we collected. And
but what was fun was honestly the conversation that we had afterwards, because I remember you talking and we all talked that we recognized that if you were just going for the smile and you tried that awkward smile, people didn't give it back. And that you recognized that there was this having to make eye contact and then smile.
yeah,
But or be smiling, but like they had to feel like you saw them and you were
that you were
legitimately
genuine.
smiling. Yeah, you were legitimately smiling at them.
Yeah.
And then most people would smile back.
Yeah.
And that was a fun game to
Yeah. So it was really
recognize
fun.
that.
So as we talk about that, and as you mentioned, you're seeing you you get a lot of smiles out of your book. I mean, as I read through different things, I just was smiling, and I teared up at certain things because of different stories that you told. How did you go about gathering the stories, and secondly, how did you choose which ones to put in the book? Because I'm sure you gathered more than what are just in the book.
So gathering the stories is was way easier than you might expect.
Really?
So first, I love feel good books. So, I'll read them and then sometimes I'll pick out a part of it. So, for example, I was reading Jim Abbott's memoir, which is fantastic. Jim Abbott was a professional baseball player. He had only one hand. And in his book, there's like two paragraphs about this teacher that made a difference in his life. And I read the whole book, loved it, and I was like, wow, I want to know about that teacher. So I tracked down the teacher's wife and talked to a bunch of people and found this story about how this third grade teacher, how he gave Jim a lesson in shoe tying that changed Jim's whole life. So in that case, it's like sometimes I'm reading stuff and I pick out the little bit. I'm like, I really want to know more about that. And then I just start digging and digging. Also, I started asking everyone I came across, like, was there some small act that changed your life? And the numbers of stories I got were incredible. Like so many people, and it was surprising. So in one case, we were out pumpkin picking with another family, and this was a friend of mine from high school. So I'd known this kid for decades, one of my closest friends. And I asked this question, and his wife goes, oh, well, Alex runs every Saturday with this doctor, this former doctor, and explained this small act of kindness that Alex did that transformed this doctor's life. And I was like, Alex, how come you never told me about this? And he's like, well, I did it for me, right? I wasn't out there like telling people I did it. And there were so many stories like that where when I asked people, I heard about amazing things they did or that other people had done for them. And then lastly, because I was writing some of this and posting it online, people would just reach out to me with their stories.
Oh.
And there is even though the news has a lot of the bad stories in there, so the violence and poverty and despair and animosity, there's all these amazing stories that are out there waiting to be found.
Yeah. There were.
I love that because when you were saying, well, I often ask the question if you had somebody do a small act of kindness that was life-changing, I immediately thought of an experience and I thought, you're right. You want to share those experiences. You want to be like, oh, I've got one. I want to tell you about this one time because it did alter your life. And well, for me, I'm like, it was a time that I thought, oh, I felt seen. But it's interesting because the person that did it, I don't know personally, and probably has absolutely no idea that she made a difference in my life that day. Like none. In fact, if I were to say something about it, I 100% guarantee she might not even remember me. And so it's an interesting thought to think of how often these small acts of kindness, sometimes the people doing it may recognize they made a difference, but I wonder how often it goes untold that you made a difference in someone's life and you never know it.
So, Jami, I want to encourage you to reach out to that person and just tell them, because you will make their day. They might not
Yes.
remember it, but to find out that you had that type of impact on someone will be life changing.
And it's interesting. I don't know that I could because it was a total stranger.
But
It was a total stranger. And I'm like, I don't know that I would be able to find her again. But it's an interesting thought that that's small because it was such a small thing that she did. Yet, and I think that's probably why I remember it is
we're all
because
dying to know what happened. Is
it
it
wasn't
something you can
anything.
share?
No, it wasn't anything big. It was literally, I was visiting a different church and this woman came up to me and she put her arm around me and she's just like, I am so glad you're here today. Like, it's really fun to see you. Is there something I can help you with? And it was interesting because she literally didn't know me. But in that moment, I was a little anxious about something and I remember like, I'm not a super touch person. Like I'm not, in fact, I have a friend that used to joke that when she would give me a hug, I'd go stiff as a board because I get uncomfortable. So that might have been it because she came and touched me. But I remember feeling like her body was warm and I felt warm. And it was just this feeling of like, okay, and I remember thinking she was so brave to come up and treat me that way as a total stranger and how it made me feel and to give me more courage to put myself out there more, to be willing to be more friendly and more kind with complete strangers.
I so there are so many stories that I wrote in the book that were about these acts of kindness that completely change someone's life,
Mm-hmm.
and the person has no idea who
Has
did
no
it
idea.
because at the time, uh, they didn't know. I mean, there was the guy who was a taxi cab driver and was telling his customer how his son had come from Haiti and couldn't get a job anywhere and was such a hard worker. And the customer said, "Tell your son to meet me at this address at 10 in the morning." The son came. The guy got the son a job at Salad Works. The son was like the lowest job there, cleaning tables, worked his way up, now owns multiple Salad Works, is supporting his family. And the guy, it's Ricardo, is the guy who has the Salad Works. And I asked him, I was like, "What'd you do for this guy?" He's like, "The guy was a stranger. He met me outside of this place, introduced me to someone. Every day I look for him. And if I see him, I give him a hug." And what I do is every day I try to do something nice for someone else as a way to pay it forward.
Yeah.
And there are so many stories like that where there's this like moment, but at the time you don't realize it. It's going to be transformational.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the stories, so you mentioned about Jim Abbott. That was one of the stories that I really loved because of that teacher taking the time. And I think you described in the book, imagining the teacher taking the time to learn themselves how to tie with one hand so that then they could teach Jim how to tie with one hand. Now, did you interview that teacher and got that information, or was that from the teacher's wife, or how did you get that insight?
So the teacher had passed away,
Okay.
Mr.
Okay.
Clarkson.
Yeah.
I did communicate with a family member,
Yeah.
and then I also talked to like other people.
Yeah.
So and Jim had shared this in a video interview.
Yeah.
And I mean, what was interesting is like, so Jim was so embarrassed he had to come to school with his shoes tied in a huge jumble of knots, and it was horrifying to him. But because he couldn't tie his shoes, he was like, "Well, this is the least of the bad things. I'll come with this jumble of knots." And like Mr. Clarkson noticed and said, "Hey,
Yeah.
Jim, I learned something today." And Jim's like, "What'd you learn?" It's like, "I'm going to show you." And he taught him how to tie his shoes with one hand. And that's what encouraged Jim to see that he could do anything he wanted to do. And what he wanted to do is play baseball. And then he went on to become a pro baseball player and spend all this time, effort, and resources helping other children who had disabilities, like trying to give back. And then I came across Nick Newell, who, when he was 6 years old, he got to do a meet and greet with Jim Abbott. And Nick said, "It's the first time I ever met anyone who had only one hand." And he was pitching for my favorite baseball team. And he told me I could do whatever I wanted to do. And that inspired Nick, who became a successful martial arts champ, like a world champion in martial arts, who now gives back to all these kids and tells me like he tries to inspire them. And sometimes he teaches them how to tie their shoes with one hand, like passing down this lesson. It's like you're saying, this little thing that happens, it has like a ripple effect that people can't even believe.
Yeah, the cover of your book, it does have that. It has the heart in the middle, and then the ripple effect that goes out. And like you said, I mean, that was one of the things that I saw as you did such a great job of showing the small thing that helped, but then the ripple effect
Yeah.
that came from that. I mean, it was massive. One of the stories I'd love to get your continued thoughts about was the story about the man that went in to eat at the diner and didn't know how he's going to pay for the meal. And then I think it was the diner that offered that said, "Oh, here," because he was looking around on the floor or something like that, the way that you describe it, for his wallet. And the diner said, "Oh, I found $20." And at that moment, that man's life changed. Give us a little bit of insight on that one.
Gosh, I love that story. So, and it ties into Christmas traditions. So Larry Stewart had been working at a job, and they were two paychecks behind paying him, and then they ran out of money, and he never got paid. So he wound up living in his car, like
Wow.
sleeping under his laundry to stay warm. And at one point, he was just so hungry, he walked into this diner, the Dixie Diner, ordered breakfast, having no idea how he'd pay for it. And then after he ate, he started looking around on the floor, said he lost his wallet. And the chef said, it was like a diner, so the chef is behind the counter, said, "Oh, here, you must have dropped this. I found it," and gave him $20. And Larry said that he decided that as soon as he was back on his feet, he would want to help other people the way that chef helped him, not in a degrading way, but
Right.
in a way that shows kindness. And once Larry started becoming successful, his first act was he went to this restaurant and noticed that the waitress had a coat. It was a restaurant where they brought the food to your car. It was a drive-in, and she had this coat that was so threadbare. He felt like it couldn't keep her warm. And he's like, "Here." He gave her a bunch of money and said, "Keep the change." And she started crying and said, like, "You don't know how much this means to me." And he thought to himself, "I do." And he went out and then proceeded to give away $200.
Mhm.
Wow.
And that's how he got started. He became a very successful entrepreneur. And what he would do is he would talk to the local fire departments and police departments and find out families in need and anonymously give them money that was from Secret Santa. And then he would uh, go to Goodwill stores and find people there and just give them like $100 around Christmas time. He said often it was like grandparents who were taking care of their grandkids and had brought them there. And he would then give money, like go to places where people were making minimum wage and give out money. And there's all these stories online from people who talk about how this changed their lives. And what was great is as the media wrote about it, more and more people became Secret Santa. So there was this army of eventually tens of thousands of people who were a part of this Secret Santa society where they were giving away money.
Mm.
And it became quite significant. I mean, Larry himself gave away, I think it was $1.6 million
Wow.
Wow.
as a Secret Santa. And one of the touching things is after he died, a foundation was set up to get funds that could support other Secret Santas in doing this work. And the first donation that came in was from a guy who was a parking attendant in Kansas City, and which is where Larry Stewart lived. And the parking attendant said, like, the first gift I got was $100 from Larry Stewart. And at
Wow.
that time, I needed that money and it changed my life. And I'm so happy to now give this money to help the next person who's going to receive it.
Wow.
So is that how Secret Santa started?
So I believe there probably could have been other Secret Santas out there, but this started a
A
movement.
movement.
A-
Yeah.
and when he died, there was so much press around it that they could see, because they have a website where people sign up and talk about what they've done, they could see that thousands of new Secret Santas signed up. And there was like so much activity around the world of people who were inspired to start doing it. And sometimes it is, we had talked about at the beginning how it could seem overwhelming, like, what can I do?
Yeah.
But then when you see someone else doing it, you're like, that's what I can do. That's a great example. I can do that myself.
So what I love about this story as you're talking is this whole story stems from, honestly, the person in the diner that treated him with respect. And so you look at it, you're like, all of that change facilitated from one small action from that person that was probably flipping hamburgers or making breakfast, treating another person with respect that changed that person's life, that then changed. I mean, it would be fascinating, I guess in this situation it is, to be able to have a little bit of a visual of the ripple effect that those where that one small act of kindness actually ended up taking and going to. And that it's almost incalculable to recognize the value of one small act of kindness. You really can't know how big of a ripple effect it's going to have, how many people it's going to change.
Yeah, exactly.
And so one of the things, just circling back a tiny bit, that you had said that you can do, because we were talking about oftentimes we don't reach out to people in need because we're not quite sure what to say, or that maybe we'll say the wrong thing. And that oftentimes the thing that you can say is just thank you for sharing. And I think gratitude plays such a huge part in so many things. And we talked last week on one of our podcasts about depression, a book that had been written about the upward spiral. And he talked in the book about how much gratitude helps depression. And so I'm curious, have you seen a gratitude component in your stories as you've gone through? Like, what part does that play in this whole small act of kindness?
So I have many thoughts about gratitude. What I saw in the stories was that so often it was someone who was the recipient of this small act, like Larry Stewart, who felt this gratitude and then went out and did enormous things.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's the woman Karen Shirk, who a small act of kindness from a healthcare worker changed her whole life. And then she set up this nonprofit that has given thousands of service dogs to kids who need service dogs. And
Really
it was so often the
story.
case
Yeah.
that gratitude drove that. And to what you were saying, I think in general, gratitude is such a powerful force. So as I mentioned, like a lot of the students I teach have been through a lot of trauma. And what I've seen is when we do efforts to help other people, to do service and to give back, everyone feels amazing. It is so empowering. So not just being grateful for what people are doing for you, but like when you can help other people, you're like really grateful. Like, I'm in this opportunity to kind of do good, and it feels great. So I think there's a lot of power in gratitude.
And you bring up something, the way that you said that, I was studying the other day, and there was a difference. I read a quote that talked about the difference between thankfulness and gratitude, and that thankfulness was words, that you're thankful for things, but gratitude was action. And I heard you, that's what I heard as you were saying that, is that you can be thankful for things that you have, but when you were talking about gratitude, you were actually talking about things that people did, that it moved them to action to serve others. So I think that's an interesting distinction, that is maybe more of that component. We can be thankful for things that we have, and that's important, and thankful for situations and people in our lives. But to transition it to gratitude, it turns into literally doing something like action.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
One of the as I kept reading here, one of the chapters that I really liked was words matter. And as we speak about gratitude, I mean, and thankfulness, those words matter. One of the things that you mentioned, I'd love for you to expand on this story, was the two little words story, that you matter, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. And this is a story from Cheryl Rice, who could be a great future guest on your show.
Oh, thank you.
She
Look into it.
she was at the time in her job, feeling really stressed out, like she wasn't making anything happen, and just disappointed, anxious, unhappy, like on the verge of what am I going to do? And someone gave her a card and it just said, "You matter." And she said she got that card and she just burst out in tears because, as we were talking about, like someone saw her and was reaffirming, like, "Hey, I know you're going through a rough time. You matter." And it made such a difference to her that she created this project where she got these cards printed and it said, "You matter." And she decided she would give them away to people. And so she was giving them away. And she said, "You know what? I'm going to open this up." And she told other people, "If you want, I'll give you sets of cards to give away." And they found that it was really, it gave people a reason to interact because you don't know what to say or do. But if you have these You Matter cards, you're giving them a card. So it's kind of like a way to get started. And she talked about how she was in the store, in the grocery store, and there was this woman checking out before her. And the woman was talking about how, her son had lost his job and they just didn't have enough money and things were really tough. And she was paying with, SNAP, which is, what food stamps are in our area. I don't know if that's across the country.
Same. Mm-hmm.
And Cheryl said she felt so bad and she didn't know what to do. In the parking lot, she just went up and said, "Look, I just was thinking about you and I want to give you this card," and gave her the You Matter card. And the woman busted out in tears, was like, "Thank you so much." Right. But she was seen by a stranger. So Cheryl decided to keep this going. And if you go to her website, which is You Matter Marathon, and you just agree you're going to give the cards away, they will send you a set of free cards, or you can download them as a PDF and print them out yourself. And, over 1 million cards have been given away across the world. And their Facebook page is these wonderful stories of people being like, "Wow, this like made my day." And, it's had this unbelievable ripple effect of recognizing people and not just being thankful to what we were saying, Jami, but like showing gratitude, like, "Here, take this. You matter. Thank you."
There is so where we are located out here, there's often times where we're driving and there's a runner that is in the morning, and it's usually during about the rush hour time, that holds up a sign that is, "I believe in you."
Yep.
And he runs all the way down. And every time I see that, I just get chills. I get so excited that this person, who I have no idea who he is or why he's chosen to do this, he holds up this sign, and during rush hour traffic, he will run the length of this road and just have the sign that says, "I believe in you."
I saw him yesterday. And I've seen him several times, but I noticed yesterday that his sign was looking a little beat up. And I just thought, I love that. I love that he's been doing this so long and so much. And he was running up the Unity Pass, so he was on the tough part of the run. But he was still just holding that sign, and it was, the visual was really amazing of him running a hard run with a beat up sign that said, "I care about you."
Yeah. Is it "I care about you" or "I
What
believe in you"?
I believe in you.
I think
That's
it's
what it is. I believe in you. Yeah. So I just, it's that, you're right. That's amazing. And he's just doing it. We should get him on the podcast too. Find out what's
to
inspired
find out
him
what
to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You should at least stop and well, I guess you don't want
Get
to
his
interrupt him in
story.
the middle of
I know.
Yeah, it's got to find a way.
Got to find a
pull
way
off
to
on
find
that
out
road.
who he is.
Well, you guys are runners, right? You could kind of jog with him and
Yeah,
That's it. We'll go run with him.
Run with him. That'd be great.
That'd be great.
So, of the stories in the book, we've talked about several of them. Which are there a few that are always on the top of your mind? I hate to say favorites because all of them could be
It's
your
like
favorite.
asking who's your favorite child.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like there's always a couple that just stand out as top of mind, and for what reason?
So I do love them all. And to your earlier question, it was really hard to like decide where do you stop,
Yeah.
right? Because there's so many incredible stories out there. I like Gabriel's Day of Kindness a lot, and I also like the Hilda backstory a lot. And I could talk you through them if you want.
Yes,
Yeah, please.
because I don't.
Yeah, tell us about both
those
of
stories.
them. Yep.
So Gabriel's Day of Kindness so when Gabriel is 6 years old, his mom, Natasha, is tucking him into bed. And she says, Gabriel, November 3rd is coming up. You're healthy. Everything's great. But November 3rd is a sad day for me. And you're going to see me sad. And I'm telling you, because I don't want you to be nervous. I don't want you to be concerned about that. And the backstory is that Gabriel had been diagnosed with a disease. And the diagnosis was on November 3rd. He was now cured and healthy, but that diagnosis still weighed really heavily on Natasha. And Gabriel said, Mom, why does it have to be such a sad day? Why can't we make it a day of light? Why can't we make it a day of light like Secret Santa Day? And here's the history of Secret Santa in their family. When Gabriel was in treatment over the holidays, someone left a pile of presents on their porch. And the presents were for Gabriel and his sister. And the card said, Merry Christmas, love, Secret Santa. And Natasha had taken that card, she pinned it on the fridge, and she said that almost every day the family talked about it. How they couldn't believe someone did that for them and how they had no idea who it was. And in fact, they never found out who it was. And when the next Christmas came along, they decided that they should become Secret Santas. So they picked out people in the community they thought could use a boost. And then Gabriel and his mom and his grandma would sneak over to their house and leave a present on the porch from Secret Santa. And after they did it the first time, they talked about how, wow, this felt even better than getting the gifts.
Yes.
And it became like their annual family tradition. And what Gabriel wanted to do was like, let's do this on November 3rd. We feel so good when we do good things for people. And he said, you know what else, Mom? Let's ask our family to do it with us. And she said, okay, I'll make a video. And she videoed, and Gabriel said, hey, I want to turn November 3rd from a day of darkness into a day of light. So please do something nice for someone else on November 3rd. And that was it. And she emailed this video to a dozen family members and some friends. And one of them emailed back and said, hey, can you put this on a Facebook page? Because then, like, if we do something, we could type in what we do. Of course, Gabriel's going nuts. Oh my goodness, it's going to be huge. It's on Facebook. And Natasha's trying to set his expectations. Like, people don't do good deeds to publicize it. We only told 12 people, and even one good deed is great. Mm-hmm. They asked people, if you do a good deed on November 3rd, please give the recipient a card. And the card should say, I'm doing this for Gabriel's Day of Kindness, to turn a dark day into a day of light. If you're so moved, please do a kind deed for someone else and pass this card along. And here's our website address. So the day comes. They live in the Boston area. The first kind act comes from Wisconsin, then Florida, then all 50 states, then Armenia, France, Czech Republic, and 53 other countries. This had gone global. And the reason is because a 6-year-old kid said, why not? Why shouldn't we do this? Now, of course, Gabriel and his family participated as well. So they went to the hospital where Gabriel was treated, and they gave out presents to the kids who were there. They went to a bank that was really helpful to the family. When Gabriel was in treatment, they gave out donuts and thank you notes. They put together little bags and got gift cards for people who were homeless. And that night they went out to dinner. They paid for another table's dinner and had the waiter bring over one of the cards. And then they watched as table after table after table paid for the next dinner until Gabriel's dad finally said, we can't stay here all night. We have to go home. When they got home, Gabriel said, Mom, is it still a dark day? No, it's not. This was a great day. Great, Mom. Can we do it again tomorrow? No. Do it next year. Yes, we can do it next year. And that's how Gabriel's Day of Kindness became an annual kindness movement, where on November 3rd, there's thousands of kind acts done around the world. Yeah. And Natasha shared that since this started, 7 families have reached out to her and told her that they've started their own days of kindness to turn their child's diagnosis day into a day of light. And wow. There's so many reasons why I love this story. One is, so often as adults, we think things are the way they are because we have decades of experience that makes us just think, hey, this is going to be bad. It's how it is. We got to get through it. And I've seen so many times, there's like three stories in the book that I love about this, about how like you can say something and ask, why can't it change? Why can't it be different? Why can't we create our own fun? And of course, kids are the best at that.
Yes.
Also, it was interesting in seeing the people who did these acts of kindness. So many of them said, like, I always wanted to do good and I thought about doing things. And when Gabriel's Day of Kindness came around, I thought, I really need to do it now because I need to do it for Gabriel. So it was almost like the You Matter cards. It was, I have a card to give out. I have this kind act I have to do for Gabriel's Day of Kindness. You know, when we give people a little impetus, a little bit of a encouragement, there's so much opportunity.
I
Really
love
is.
that. I love that. I love that. And you're right. Just having, even in the doing of something good, they were doing it for someone else. Like, I want to do this for Gabriel. I've thought about it, but I just needed that little nudge to get me going in the right direction. I also love, I have a sister that had a son that had cancer, and those diagnosis days when I can, not having gone through it as a parent myself, but watching her go through it, there's just the bottom falls out of your world. And no matter what happens after that, that day is life changing, and it impacts everything. And so I was thinking about how often we have moments in our life where the bottom fell out, and that day is a day of remembrance that's terrible. But the ability to take something that was life changing and turn it into life changing for good is amazing, and I think empowering for people to look at it and say, there's nothing good about getting the news that you got, but we can take and turn that on end and turn it into something good and change literally the way that we feel about that day. That's very amazing and empowering, I think.
Instead of a day of darkness, it becomes a day of light, like you said.
And still a day that changed your life, but maybe changed your life and the trajectory in a good way rather than a terrible way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The second story that you had, that you were...
You know what? So before I get into that, there's like these two other small stories that I think are worth sharing. All right.
Yeah.
These are also about how you can change your perspective on things, which I think is important. And these are from Ronald McDonald Camp, which is a camp for kids with cancer and their siblings. And I was a volunteer counselor here for a few years. It's a week-long overnight camp. And so the first year I'm a counselor, you know, half the kids in your bunk have cancer, you know, a bunch of, you know, or have had cancer, and others are their siblings. The kids who are sick, you have to get them medicine throughout the day. So at night, that first night when the campers were there, I get together the kids who need to go up to the wellness center to get their medicine. And no one wants to go. Like, people, I didn't realize this, but like kids with cancer, they don't want to take their medicine because it makes their hair fall out. It makes them feel like barfing. It makes them feel sick. And you could say, oh, well, this is going to eventually, you know, hopefully make you better, but they don't want to take their medicine. And that first night, so I'm dragging my kids up to the wellness center, and we get there and all the lights are out and the music is blasting and there's this giant disco ball, and the staff says, like, you can't have your medicine unless you dance for it. We're not going to give it to you. And the kids started dancing and they had fun. And every other night they couldn't wait to go there. And I think, like, I would have never thought you're going to make this fun. I just like, yeah, it makes your hair fall. It makes you feel like barfing. It's just going to be.
There's nothing fun about this.
Right. But thank heavens the wellness staff is like, why not? And then, so the other little story, also from my first year at Ronald McDonald Camp, I get up to camp and I meet my co-bunk counselor. As a counselor, you get up there a week early because you're setting up the bunk, you're getting everything ready, you get some training. And I see we're unpacking our stuff, and I see that Jim brought a leaf blower. So I'm thinking, like, he's probably super into being clean. He's gonna like leaf blow our bunk out every day. Because, you know, I'd looked him up online, and his profile picture, he's like wearing a tie, and who wears a tie in their profile picture? So I'm like, Jim, like, what's up with the leaf blower? He goes, oh, I wake the kids up with it. They love it. And I'm thinking, all right, you know, my son was the same age as the kids in our bunk. and he would hate getting woken up with a leaf blower. But we'll see. So we have this the first day when the
Did
kids.
did he aim it at them, or was it the sound that woke them up?
So that first, he didn't just aim at it. Like, you get this crazy windstorm and you're under your covers everywhere. So that the first day when the kids arrive, you sit down and you're in the bunk going over the rules. So, you don't exclude anyone. We do everything as a group. You don't touch other people's stuff. And then Jim like whips out his leaf blower and goes, guys, if you don't wake up in the morning, I'm going to leaf blow you. And the kids are looking at each other. They don't know if he's joking. They look at me like, is it for real? And I don't know.
I don't know.
I know Jim one day. So we have this tradition at camp called Polar Bear Swim. We wake up all the kids early. We take them up to the pool and you jump in. Some kids love it. It's an adventure. You're like swimming first thing in the morning. Other kids hate it. They want to be sleeping. The water was actually kind of cold in the morning. So I found it invigorating, but not everyone wants to jump into freezing cold water. Midway through the week, not a single kid would get out of their bed. And Jim would leaf blow all of them. And it wasn't because they didn't want to go. They loved it. Like, who's crazy enough to use a leaf blower inside and to stick it under their covers and like blow their covers everywhere? And afterwards, we'd go up to the pool. No one would complain. Everyone would be laughing. They'd jump in. And it's because Jim said, like, why should some kids not like this? Why can't I make it fun for everyone? And of course, like, I go home and I tell my wife and we tell Jack about it. And our son is like, I want to get woken up with a leaf blower. So for the next 30 days, I wound up waking him up with a leaf blower.
That's awesome.
And it's important, I think, for us to just remember in our lives, like, how can we make certain situations fun, even if they don't seem that way? And, it doesn't always work, but asking that question has helped me a lot at different times to like make something that otherwise might be unfun into a really enjoyable experience.
When I read about the dance for your medicine, I was just absolutely enthralled with that whole concept that here's this medicine that no one wants to take. I understand cognitively that it will be good for me, but then to turn something into a place where you got to dance for it. And it's like, I have to dance for this stuff that's going to make me throw up. And how that just turned everything around. Absolutely amazing.
And I love the question, how can I make this fun? I think that's great. I'm a person that really thrives well in order, and fun can sometimes be disorderly. And so, but I recognize through life, I've recognized how important, like, order has a place, but fun is so important. It really is so important. And especially in my mind, it's these times when there's a lot of things in life that we don't have control over. And you can get stuck trying to figure out how to have control over something that you don't have control over, you have very little control over. And I think fun takes that up on end and says, look, it's okay to sometimes feel out of control. It can be fun. Maybe it's fun to feel a little out of control, and changing that can be really beneficial. I can see. I've had experiences with the same thing. So I love that. Leaf blower. I don't know if we can let our kids listen to this podcast, though.
Yeah, no,
do I want to wake them up with a leaf blower?
Maybe it'll be fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be fun. There you go. That's it. It's like, Jami, step out there. Try it.
You need one of those tiny battery-powered leaf blowers, not like...
Okay. Start small. You don't need
one in the garage where I started up with the gas, and it's like...
That's what I think I was thinking. I'm like, it'll blow the whole room to pieces. Which may be fun.
It could be fun.
That is so good.
So just before we get your last story here, Streakers, we've been talking with Brad Aronson. Fantastic conversation. One of the things that you have in your book is suggestions at the end of each chapter of what you can do to either reach out or to acknowledge or to see someone or to offer gratitude or be humble. Also at the end of the book, Streakers, he has a number of different organizations that you can volunteer and be associated with in any number of different ways. And remember, it's small and simple things. It's laughably small things that make a huge, huge difference. Brad, as we close things up with your last story here, one of the things I thought about, and we have many streakers that are out there that have, for example, compliment at least one person every day, or they have smile at least one person every day. And this consistent, this consecutive nature of a streak where you just keep that going, we get information back from them that it changes their lives. It changes their lives and then others' lives. And it really is that nature. And that's why I wanted to talk with you and have you on, is that small act, one small act at a time. And what we encourage everyone to do is do that laughably simple act and set a streak around it so that it continues for as long as you can. So, with that, we're really glad that you're with us today. Share with us your last story, and then we'll finish everything up.
All right. So the last story is about Hilda Back. So she grew up in Germany during World War II, and she was Jewish. So she and her family were in huge danger. And in their community, the community was very upset about what was happening, but they didn't see how they could stop the Nazis or stop the German government. They decided what they could do was get enough money together that Hilda and her family could pay for them to escape to Sweden, because Jews were safe in Sweden. And that's how Hilda wound up getting there as a teenager. And she became basically an au pair, helping a family raise their kids there, and then went on to get a degree, and she became a kindergarten teacher. And she always wanted to give back and said, I really want to give back internationally because I feel like I came to Sweden and they opened their arms to me. One of the ways she found to give back was this charity where she could donate $45 a year, and it would pay for the secondary school education of a child in Kenya. Because in Kenya, even though primary school is free, secondary school costs money. So the kids in poverty cannot continue their schooling. They basically have to go to work because it is the family needs that money. So her $45 a year wound up providing a scholarship to Chris Maburu. And Chris did great in secondary school. And then he got to go to college. He went to University of Nairobi. In Kenya, even though they charge for secondary school, college is free. Chris did so well at University of Nairobi, he got a scholarship to Harvard. And when he graduated, he became a human rights lawyer advocating against genocide for the United Nations, not even knowing anything about Hilda. And Chris told me that when he went back to his village, he had this enormous guilt. He said that his friends were working in the fields alongside their parents, and they were so poor that if they were sick, they couldn't afford medical care. If they were out of work for more than a couple days, the family would be hungry because they just were living that much day to day. And Chris said, I wasn't any smarter than them. There just weren't enough scholarships. And somehow I got one of the few scholarships. So I got to continue school. And because of that guilt, he decided to set up his own nonprofit. And he never met Hilda, but he received a letter from her with the first like early donation. And he knew her name. So he named his nonprofit the Hilda Back Education Fund. And so far, it's paid for the secondary school education of over 900 children, which changes the lives of over 900 families. Because when your kid gets that education, they can get a better job that can pull a whole family out of poverty. And he really wanted to meet Hilda. So he pestered and petitioned the Swedish embassy until finally he got her contact information. And he said he went to visit her, and she became like a second mom to him. So he would go and visit her at least once a year. And he said it was a pretty big trip from where he lived in Africa to see her. She came to his village and was made a tribal elder, which is a huge honor. And
no kidding.
She was really lucky in that she got to see the impact she had, because she had said once in an interview, I always wondered if that $45 evaporated or if it did any good. And obviously it changed Chris's life. And now his nonprofit is changing lives every single day. And he says a lot of his funding comes from students who have received scholarships, that he gets these letters saying, now I have a good job. Here's some money for the next scholar. In fact, two of the students who received scholarships from him set up their own nonprofit in Mombasa, which is Kenya's second largest city. And the nonprofit there pays for the secondary school education of children in Mombasa. And then on top of that, there's Kathleen Ismail. And she told me that when she heard Chris's story and heard about Hilda, she said, wait, I'm an ordinary person just like them. I could do something. And she was a volunteer in Ghana and decided to set up a nonprofit to pay for the secondary school education of children in Ghana. And they paid for 200 scholarships. And then thankfully, Ghana wound up making secondary school free. And now those scholarships go to providing vocational education, higher education, and building computer resource centers in high poverty areas. And, so that ripple effect continues in the work that she's doing. And on top of that, Chris has started a global nonprofit to make secondary school free for all children in the world. And they are advocating to make that change. And again, all this came from Hilda's $45 donation, which wouldn't have even been possible if her family if back in Germany, the community didn't say, we can't stop the German army. We don't know what we can do, but instead said, what can we do? And they found something they could do, all contributing their money together to save Hilda. And where that went was just fantastic.
Wow. The ripple effect that came from that, absolutely amazing. As we look at and consider what one small act can do, sometimes we have in the laws of streaking, the first law is to make it laughably simple, and that's so that we can do it. What's interesting is as you told this story, what may be laughably simple to us means a world of difference to someone else and will ripple throughout the world, just like what you said. Streakers, we've been talking with Brad. I would encourage you to purchase his book. I'll just hold it up here. HumanKind. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I would encourage you also to set a streak to read at least one story, maybe a week, and be inspired by this, and then go out and do what some of the things are that Brad recommends. He recommends at the end of each chapter that you take just 15 minutes of time and think about people that have either changed your life or that you could think about and change their life in just a small, simple act. And then also, as mentioned before, all of the different areas and organizations that are out there for you to volunteer time and energy, but it can be done in such small, simple ways that everyone can do it. Brad, we've enjoyed talking with you today. If people want to get a hold of you or learn a little bit more, where would you recommend they reach out?
I mean, they can go to my website, which is Brad Aronson, ARONSON.com, and then connect with me on social media if they want, or email me, or whatever's a comfortable way to reach out.
Wonderful. That's great. And everyone else, one of the things that we'll do on behalf of Brad is we will set up in the Streaking app a HumanKind community, and we'll suggest in there a streak to do at least one kind thing every day. And feel free to post in there, streakers, what you do as far as the HumanKind thing that you do, and move forward with that. Also, streakers, if you want to reach out to Jami or I, you always can via the Streaking app, or if you want to email us directly, it's Jeffrey, Jeffrey, at thestreakingapp.com, or
Jami, Jami, at thestreakingapp.com.
Until we have the opportunity to talk with you again,
keep streaking.
Make a better you.